I just want to say a huge thank you to Pathwater, one of the sponsors of Unbound Living. These are water bottles that I do not go anywhere without. I constantly refill it, reuse it. I drop salt in it. It's one of the best things that I've ever come across. If you have not tried Pathwater, you need to. Yeah. So I'm glad that you are here today.
Yes,
you know,
sir.
you and I have met, it's probably been well over a year.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's kind of funny. I've met several people in the sauna, but I also met you in the sauna, which sounds kind of odd.
Nah.
You know, at the
social
South
spot,
Gym.
man.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming to Unbound Living.
Yes, sir.
Matt, I would love for you to tell me a little bit about yourself, because you've got a history, a positive history, but there may be some stuff that I do not know about.
Sure.
But I kind of want to hear your story because I know it's a pretty interesting one. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike. So, high level, I'm Matt Gronberg. I'm 26 years old, and I own a business called Storage Scholars. Storage Scholars is a moving, storage, and shipping logistics service for college students, mostly their parents as well, since they're the ones that are benefiting quite often, and the actual institutions themselves on like a commercial moving and storage basis. So this all started when I was 18, and I joined a business partner and friend from college in our mission to not be broke and to try and pay our way through school without taking on student loans.
That is awesome.
We went to Wake Forest University, amazing school. I love it dearly. My life would be very different if I didn't attend that school. But going to that school, it's got a hefty price tag. At the time, it was $71,000 a year cost of attendance. And so obviously I got some good financial aid, applied for some scholarships, but there was still a balance at the end of it. And so we said, how are we going to make some money day one, right? We got to start cash flow on our way through school. What's a good hustle? And we had a couple international hallmates, one from Ethiopia, the other from China. Wake being 82% out of state or international, not a lot of people from North Carolina were like, wait, maybe a lot of kids have this problem. They said, hey, Matt, Sam, like it costs $650 to ship one box back home. Where do I put it here in the States? Like, what do I do? And we were pretty hustlers, and we said, all right, you know what? We got a pickup truck and a little bit of hustle. If you pay us a $50 deposit, we'll move and store the whole thing for you. And they said, $50 down? How much do you want to charge? And we said, just pay us by the box, right? We'll do like $25 a box this year, and we'll drive it down the road. We took the $50 deposit from 64 kids that year, put that as the down payment on the first storage unit, got the first month, and then we were off to the races.
Wow. You know, it's kind of funny. That's how most businesses start. And even kind of as we were discussing before this, it's important when you go into business, I feel, to figure out what issues are out there. And then come up with a solution to those issues. That's the easiest thing. 100%. You can have a passion about something, but really, what are you conquering, right? What's the why? Everybody always asks, what's the why? And sometimes the why is a passion. But I've always been of the mindset that you have to solve a problem. And that's tremendous. Our middle son actually went to Oklahoma for 1 year. And one of the things that I thought was super impressive, they didn't allow you to move in. And so you and I had met at that time anyway, and it immediately made me think of you. And because it was a third-party business that did it, although they weren't doing the storage and everything else, but it brought you to mind. And I was like, I wonder if Matt's doing this as well and has a contract, because literally you would pull up in the truck and they would offload everything, and they were like, you just go to your room. And we'll be there in 15 minutes. And they moved everything for you, took it in your room. And the speed that that took was, it made it so smooth, it was unbelievable.
100%.
But again, that's solving a problem.
Yeah.
So you started that in college. And are you using college students as employees? How did that work?
Yeah, so at the beginning, rule number one of entrepreneurship, you got to use what you have, right? And at the time, we had a lot of 18-year-old friends that were also broke, and they wanted to make some money, they wanted to hustle a little. And so we said, all right, who are going to be our movers? Well, we have our friends from the club soccer team, we have our friends from different classes, let's hire them, right? They all want to make some beer money. They're down to work during final exam week in between their finals. They don't have a lot going on if they already finished their hard stuff. So those were our first team members. Since then, that's been a pretty big mission of the company, is saying that college students, especially with the right guardrails and the right mentorship and the right coaching, can do a lot more than we give them credit for. You just need to give them structure, right? That same kid who can get 100% on their organic chem exam might also not know how to do laundry. So when we pair them with adults and good coaches and good managers, you can get a lot out of students. They're very smart. A lot of them are charismatic. They create good customer interactions. And so still to this day, that's the backbone of our labor force. We've created 2,000 student jobs over the years, and we've paid $3.4 million to college students.
That is super impressive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny, it's, you know, as we have kids come back and forth from college, our middle son is graduating this year, so that's not an issue, but we've got one at Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever he comes back, all of his stuff comes back.
Yep.
And it fills up my garage or fills up a storage unit. And I've even called you and gone, hey, man, are you in this market? Just because I'm like, I don't want to tote this shit back and forth. Stuff gets broken, gets lost. And then I, as a parent, lose my space, right?
100%.
You know, when they come back. So that in itself is brilliant. Entrepreneurship.
Sure.
So is that something that runs in your family? Is it something, did you have a mentor, or did you look at someone and go, I want to do that? Or where did this come from?
It's funny. So I feel like the word entrepreneurship kind of gained some popularity maybe in the last like 5 to 10 years. Like, I don't know if it was always like that.
Yeah, and you start seeing it under everybody's, you know, social media profile. Everybody's an entrepreneur. And it's, I guess anybody can be that, but are you really a business owner? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my dad definitely, in every sense of the word, was an entrepreneur. I just never thought about it, nor did he talk about it as such. So he actually was trying to inspire me to become a doctor and go down the medical path. He always wanted to be a doctor. We were both really into sports medicine, orthopedics, emergency medicine. And that was kind of my path, right? He was trying to do that, and he was working his butt off trying to get his way through school, and he wasn't able to actually put the pieces together between car accident, surgeries, and this and that. And so he ended up teaching first aid and CPR as an instructor to different groups. And so I didn't, again, realize at the time, but he was totally an entrepreneur. He found a Massachusetts law that required certain people in certain organizations to have people certified once a year. So he would build the relationship with a construction company, for example. Massachusetts state law said you need to get your people certified, at least 50% of them certified once a year, because you work a dangerous job. So he'd go in, he'd teach, he'd certify all the guys, and they loved him. So he got a recurring contract every year, and he did that for most of my life, right? So I didn't realize it, but he was always self-employed. And so I think a little bit of that was empowering. And so I think as I started turning the gears and learning how to become an entrepreneur, I think I thought of him and was able to take a lot of the things that he taught me as a kid.
Yeah, and that kind of probably became the norm, right? We are products of our environment, period, right? Something that you said that stuck out to me is something I try to preach constantly. I always say I buy from people, not companies. So, and I'll give you a for instance.
Sure.
Our banker is gone to 3 different banks. He leaves, I leave with him, right? And it's one of those things that I buy from people. And that's built on relationships.
Absolutely.
And you said, you know, that your dad had these relationships and made these relationships to continue his business. And I'm a firm believer in that. Would you say that that's something that you took from him, is the relationship aspect with business?
I think the relationship above all else is the name of the game that I'm playing right now, because my main job in my company is I go out and I try and partner with an actual university, like the institution itself. They help promote it to all the students, and they've said from day one, they're not particularly money motivated. The person who's signing my agreement doesn't see any of the money that's exchanged either way. If they sign a contract with us, they're doing this for the students and the relationship. And most of the pitch that I give to these schools is, hey, you can have any moving company you want come onto your campus and start serving your students. But now you know me, now you know my character, you're gonna get my cell phone number. Whenever we have a problem, because I promise you there will be one, you're going to call me, and I'm going to take full ownership, and I'm going to fix it.
Yeah, because
I think that's the name of the game.
100%, because it's never the problem; it's always the solution.
Yeah,
and that stuff, you know, we talk to with, you know, and I with my employees and or partners.
Yeah,
you know, if there's an issue, I want you to have at least 2 or 3 solutions, and let's talk about the solution, because it helps, right? I want to empower people to come up to be able to fix and cure their own problems, right? And okay, cool, let's discuss it together. Which is the best route to fix this issue? You know, and again, because stuff's always going to happen. There's nothing you can do about that. It's how and what manner you take to fix it, right? Because that in itself is huge for relationships in general.
And there's a lot of folks that pitch that they're perfect, which is just BS, right? It's coming out their mouth and nobody believes that, right?
Yep.
Like we're going to do 10,000 college student moves in the month of August in 200 different colleges. I promise you something will go wrong every single day. It's logistics. Some truck will be delayed, right? Something will happen. And so I just need to take full ownership and promise you that I'm a solutions guy.
Yeah.
Right.
200 schools.
200 colleges.
200 schools. So it goes from you know, the $50 deposit to 200 schools.
Oh, yeah.
In the middle there's something called growth.
Yes, sir.
And with that, I know that you did a little stint or was on a show, Shark Tank, that I would love to hear about.
Sure.
Tell me about that experience right out of the gate. And I've got a couple questions for you on top of that.
Yeah. So we were basically from that 18-year-old startup phase up until we were graduating, our first year graduated, we grew that business from the $50 deposit hustle stage up to about $2 million in revenue. And we had applied on a complete cold application online to go on Shark Tank. Didn't think anything of it. 6 months later, we get a call from the producers and they say, hey, we thought your business was pretty interesting. We'd like to have you guys submit an application and an interview. We submitted an 8-minute video of us talking directly into the camera, no editing, just trying to be ourselves and show our personality. And that's exactly what they wanted. They said, don't edit it. Don't use the camera to make you look good. See if you can make yourself look good with your personality. We sent the written app, and then next thing you know, we were flying out there in July. The show is as authentic as it gets. These sharks know nothing about you. They get no prep notes. You have no idea going in how they're going to react. And you don't even know when you're going to go on. We were probably their 9th or 10th pitch that day.
Oh, wow.
We went on at like 7 p.m. And so I was terrified that they were going to be burnt out and sick of seeing people.
Right?
Man. Yeah. But it went perfect. We ended up getting offers from Damon, Mark, Robert, and Kevin. And so it was kind of like a dream come true to have that bidding war. And I think a lot of it is that Sam and I, my business partner, we just practiced that pitch and every question and knew our numbers for weeks and weeks and weeks leading up. And I think if anybody's ever anxious about something, you just got to practice until you're so effing sick of saying it that it's boring to you. And that's what it was.
Yeah, 100%. So did you get stumped by anything? Did they ask that one question that you're like, damn, I didn't think of that?
No.
No?
They were pretty good. They asked a couple like quick ones that involved you recall memory, tons of numbers. And so there was a couple we slipped on, and then we would just gracefully correct the other. Because when one guy's talking, that was the benefit of having us both up there, is if Sam was saying something and I thought it wasn't quite accurate, I'd jump in and be like, oh, actually, I think it was this. And like we would just do the honesty live correction.
Yep.
And so that was really helpful because if I messed up, he could do the same and save me.
Well, and that shows true partnership, right?
Yeah.
So you went through that, and I'm sure you were anxiety ridden.
Oh, yeah.
Going through that just because, I mean, you're on a stage, you know, I mean, damn near you're standing there naked giving your presentation, 100%. Right?
Yeah.
So how did it end?
Yeah.
Who did you end up with? How did it go?
Yeah. So we ended up taking a deal with Mark Cuban, who was definitely who we went in there to partner with. He is the man. He's authentic. He's loud. He's brass. He's a fighter. He fights for his people. And I was like, this is going to be our guy. And so we took a deal for $250,000 for 10% of the company. You know, at this point, like looking at what has happened since, I would have given him 10% of the company for free. Look at who that guy is and how connected he is and what a stamp of approval that did for our business and our life. And he's been an amazing partner to work with since.
That is awesome. And that's one of my questions is, you know, everybody kind of sees the front end and every once in a while you see a follow-up.
Yeah.
But what is that relationship like after the show? How does something like that work? I've also heard sometimes that, you know, offers will happen, but they don't necessarily get sealed, you know, or signed.
Well, so basically there's a good amount of vetting that goes in pre-show, but every one of these investors has their own due diligence process. So then you enter like a normal investment due diligence period. And the problem is some entrepreneurs at this point have figured out that you can go pretend you want to take a deal, say all the right things, get basically the commercial, get the big episode, and then you can just screw over the shark and say, I don't actually want to give you the equity, right? So that's one aspect of what goes on, is you can get all the benefit of Shark Tank and people think you got a deal and not give away any of your company.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that portion, but it makes total sense, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, in reality, that's just, oof.
Well, and that's just, in my opinion, that's just silly for an entrepreneur to do that. Because, the Shark Tank businesses, a lot of these are not like venture billion-dollar businesses. They're cool, fun, like unique businesses. If you have an opportunity to work with one of the greatest entrepreneurs ever, why would you not give that equity away? What do you care?
You're shortening your span of becoming successful, right?
Yeah.
And that just, it involves being surrounded by those that have done it and others that are successful. And that's becoming a product of your environment, right?
Totally.
And so, okay, so you go into true negotiations. How long does a deal like that take?
It was,
or did it take you guys?
It wasn't horrible. We were on the more mature side, so we had a lot more to give them because we were doing 5 years of history and showing them everything. But I think we closed it in about 5 months after the show.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't horrible. But yeah, then the other side of the aisle is that sometimes entrepreneurs get a little loose-lipped, and on the show they say things that aren't exactly true. So those are the two sides of due diligence that kill deals and probably lead to that 50% close rate. Is entrepreneurs getting greedy or entrepreneurs saying something that's not exactly true.
Exactly. So how is that relationship then after the show? Is that a continued relationship? How does that work? Mark, looking behind the curtain type of deal, the stuff that they don't show.
Yeah, Mark is an amazing partner. And so his basically take is, I will give you as much out of this relationship as you put in. Right. So he says, I got about 400 something companies. They all want my attention. They all want my time. All I ask of you is that you send me a weekly email update. It can be 2 bullet points. It could be 16 paragraphs. But tell me what's going on. Even if it's shitty, even if it's the worst day of the year, that's where I thrive. I want to help young guys. I want to get you through that crap period. And he's held his word 1,000,000 times over. So I took that part seriously. I actually do email him once a week. He always responds. He's one of the most responsive humans in my entire contact base. And he'll email back within like 15 to 20 minutes on average.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable.
That's incredible.
Because he's just on, man. He's on the go. Even when he's on the way to the Mavs, he'll just quickly fire off an email and be like, this is good, worried about this, like, let's talk further. And so it's really, really helpful.
That's awesome. And that's, I would think that that'd be extremely difficult, because you just got to look at someone like that and just their investment portfolio, period, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds, I would think,
100%.
And that's just got to be a constant effort to do something like that. And that takes true organization or true ADD-ness.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I wonder, of that 400, and I have no idea. That's just pure hunch. But like, I wonder how many people get the money from a guy like that and then go, I won. And then they wipe their hands and then they wait. They don't communicate whatsoever. They don't give updates. They don't provide any value to their investors. And then they have a big ask. They're like, hey, can you introduce us to this person? Hey, can you talk about us on this podcast? Like, if I was Mark in his shoes, I'd be like, F no.
Yeah, no, why?
You gave me
would
nothing.
Yeah,
now you want to ask for something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even with those partnerships outside of the show, I mean, those have got to be just tremendous, and just to keep on top of one another for sure. 100%. So I've always seen too, and I love Shark Tank, and I love the brassness and the openness of everything. And I get myself sometimes in a little bit of trouble for being a little vocal about certain things, but it's just who I am, right?
I get it.
But with that said, a lot of times they do follow-ups.
Yeah.
Where are we on that?
Oh, it's funny you ask, Mike. Yeah. We are actually a couple weeks out from having the Shark Tank update air, and so it's going to go live on TV. We're going to have a big update, and it's going to show where we were 2 years ago, what's happened since, and it's been one of the most insane 2 years of my life. We went from 2 million all the way to 7 million. During that time, we had one of the hardest years of my entire life. We got into bad partnerships. We had big pending litigation. We had all sorts of stress. I was pulling out my hair. I barely slept. And then this year we turned it around. And so that growth that you talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I don't think people or even myself realized how painful it can really be to try and scale a big organization.
No, it can be. And that's one of the things people look at, I guess, individuals that own their own businesses, and they're like, oh, this is rosy all the time. You own your own business. You can do whatever you want, which is typically the complete opposite.
For
you know, it's 9 to 5 jobs, really, that they can kind of do what they want because they have no responsibility.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people are like, hey, if you're your own boss, that's great. But I'm like, if you're a good owner of a business, you really don't have one boss. You have like thousands, which is all your customers. And when they call you at 9 p.m., you better answer the phone. You better fix the problem. And so I think that's like a falsity about entrepreneurship. People over glorify it. People think it's like you take vacation whenever you want. You go to the gym at random hours of the day. That's all BS, right? When you have 40 employees like we have, if I'm just like working out in the middle of the day, if I'm calling from a beach in Cabo, think any of them are going to be motivated to work for a guy like that?
Yeah.
Got to lead by example.
Yeah. And that's one of the things too. My wife, you know, spent almost 25 years in corporate HR, and she preached work-life balance.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was able to sucker her out of corporate America and get her, you know, she got a real estate license and she sells what we build.
Yeah.
Which gave us a ton of freedom. And at the end of the day, a lot of the times I would end up selling a product for a real estate agent anyway. So I started looking, I was like, why on earth am I paying someone else to do this when
100%.
I'm doing it? So we kept the money in-house, which helped us. However, what she has learned is there's not a lot of balance, right? We are always on. We love what we do, but we have our balance in different ways, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how most businesses can be handled over a laptop or a phone 100%. In most cases, 100%. Which gives you more freedom than a lot of people had years ago.
True.
However, to your point, you're always on.
Yeah.
So with that said, and you know, there's always something, a fire to put out. There's always something, right? Yeah. What is the one thing that you would tell yourself when you started this business to look out for? What's that one thing that you learned that you will never do again? And sometimes it's difficult to look back on it, but I'll give you a for instance.
Yeah.
We'll have superintendents where I will go out to a job site, and before an inspection, I'll see certain things that I know are wrong, and I refuse to tell them. And the reason is because if I tell them, they may not remember it the next time. However, if they go through an inspection and they get popped for that, they will never forget it.
I love that.
Right? Because they have to come back with the inspection report.
Yeah.
And I go, how did it go? Oh, well, I've got these 4 things I've got to fix.
Yeah.
And I'll go, yeah, I saw that. And then I'll get the response, why didn't you say something? And I tell them, again, you had to come to me with this sheet and you had to have an inspector tell you this was wrong. And I guarantee you it'll never happen again. And truth be told, in most cases, those are like the first 3 or 4 things that they'll look for the next time they have an inspection, right?
Because you taught them the real lesson.
Bingo, right? Yeah. And it's that, you know, teach a man to fish thing. So, and it works, right? Yeah. That's how I learned. You know, no one really taught me how to do anything. It was a school of hard knocks. Yeah. So I found great knowledge in that, so I like using that. So with that said, that's always something that's brought up with our guys. What's one thing that sticks out in your head that you'll go, I will never do that again?
So for me, I think it is, in the beginning, you can be an extreme action type of person, right? Like, hey, I'm going to make this change. I'm going to make it aggressively, and I'm going to make like a pricing change at every single one of the campuses. And it's fine because you're small and lean and limber. But when you start going all in on all your decisions as you mature as a business, there becomes a bit of a leverage problem. And I don't mean like financial leverage, but if you put all your eggs in one basket in a decision, in a partner, in an employee, and you give somebody the keys to everything, and you have no testing, no backup plan, you just trust, there could be a real problem if things start to unravel in a negative way, if they have all the ability to screw you over. And you don't realize people have malintent until you experience it and you get thrown through the ringer. And part of that's a leverage problem. If you just test out, and you're patient as an entrepreneur, you test out the decision on one market or for a couple weeks, or you give them a test project that's really small. I'm sure it's the same in your industry. New subcontractor, have them do one small project for you, and you watch them and you see how they are. You give them more. We weren't like that. We trusted people blindly, and we said, you know what? we got to grow fast. We need to do this fast. And we gave people too much leverage on us to screw us over.
Makes total sense. And those are things that you end up learning a process for. You know, even little as it may be, there's a process to that, you know. So something you brought up as well that I'd like to get into is typically entrepreneurs or business owners, we'll say that, because again, the whole entrepreneur logo tag on it. They can't stay in one thing for a while. They start looking at things and they look at the next things. We've gotten, you know, in the past 5 to 8 years involved in several different businesses. Just because you have to diversify. You know, in the building industry, we had 2008 and we had 2010 through 12. And now we're going through a time as well where we've got interest rates, things are selling slower, stuff like that. But with that said, you go through those up and down times. That's one of the reasons why we started maintaining ownership and having income producing properties. And a lot of that's just age and wisdom, I guess. Not that I'm smart, but I surround myself with people that are a hell of a lot smarter than I am.
Smart, dude.
But with that said, you want to start reaching out. Are there any other projects or are there anything else that has grabbed your attention that you've levitated to that you're looking at now?
Definitely. So I think within the core business of Storage Collar's umbrella, we actually took the approach for the first 8 years of hammer one product, like one avatar. It's the college student that's on campus, and just serve them super well. And then throttle campuses, just grow markets and run the same playbook over and over. And I think keeping that hyper core focus is what let us get to where we are so quick. Now, I think we're at a point where we're going to run out of that method of growth. There's not infinite amounts of colleges that are going to be dense enough markets for us to make a profit. So now we need to add other service lines and start to diversify. And so in the last 24 months, we started adding commercial moving and storage for furniture companies, right? So now whenever a college buys thousands of sets of furniture for the wood dresser and the beds and all that, some companies got to go in and pull out all the old stuff, donate it to Habitat for Humanity, and go build all the new furniture in that building. And so now that same labor force that we worked so hard to recruit and train, that was only basically active for 6 weeks in May and 6 weeks in August, now we keep them going all summer. And so then we got a partnership with the Marriott. And so we started doing corporate relocation, right? They said, hey, we have all these basically folks that furniture is becoming less and less of a priority. Would you guys do small by-the-box shipments for people that are moving from their college to their first apartment or their first job with the Marriott? We said we would love to. So now our revenue is getting spread out throughout the year. We're diversifying a little bit, and it's made for a lot more stable of a business.
Makes total sense because with your business, I can totally see that. You're going to have ebbs and flows big time. You got super busy seasons and then not at all.
Well, what's crazy is we literally, and some people look at my P&L and they want to throw up because we lose money, like hardcore lose money, 11 months of the year, and we make all of it in 1 month. As people pay their invoices.
It's almost like selling Christmas trees.
It's crazy.
It's or fireworks.
100%.
Wow, that makes total sense. And again, it's using what you know to different services that you can profit from as well. Even in the construction industry, I would love to own an HVAC company, a plumbing 100%. Company, an electrical company. It's separate, but it's something that I can utilize to make my other things better. You know?
And as long as you have a good operator that's an expert in that field and you're like the owner that's funding it, I think that method works. I think where we probably go wrong as entrepreneurs is thinking we can just do everything really well. As soon as we split our focus, like if I started saying I want to sell mattresses to college students because that seems like a good thing, I already know how to market to them. Well, then I would have to learn all the crap that e-commerce guys have to learn of buying inventory and how do I sell that product? And now I got to learn Shopify, and I don't know that shit.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never done it, so I would need an expert to help me.
Well, and that's funny too, is as what I think you're going to run into, and I'm sure you know now, is again, we've talked about surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you.
Absolutely.
There becomes a point where you have to bring people in. You know, I've always looked at business and opportunity as a pizza. And everybody has their own slice of pizza as to what they do best.
Absolutely.
You know, I have shortcomings. So I've got to hire someone that's a beast on top of that, that is extremely smarter than me to help me grow. You know, and even to the point when you're a small business, you hire what you can, right?
Absolutely.
And then once you start to grow, you hire what you need.
Totally.
And that making that transition sometimes is difficult, right? Because as a small business, you have these great relationships with your employees that sometimes are closer than employee, you know, and supervisor or owner.
Definitely.
And then it's truly reaching out to have someone give you the ability to double your numbers.
100%.
So hiring for that is going to cost you money.
Definitely.
And it's an investment, but it can also be that extra set of eyeballs that looks at something and can double and triple, you know, your multipliers. And that's where it's at. And that's where it's, you know, where we started jumping into some of these other businesses is looking at the individuals that are running them and the people. And again, much like I buy from people and not companies, I invest in people, not companies.
100%.
You know, most of what we invest in, I could, you know, they could sell. I've used this quite a while, especially with one fella. He could sell Post-it notes. I don't care. I'm investing in him. Period. Just because he can sell ice to an Eskimo. He's just got that, right? Yeah. And I love that. And I love being a part of helping anything grow. That's fun to me.
I agree.
How would you define where you're at now?
Sure.
Do you think you are successful? And do you think in your mind you will ever be successful?
I think
that's a tough one.
I think at this point it would be tone deaf to say that I'm not successful and try and downplay it. Like, I'm really blessed. Like, obviously we got into this young. I think luck plays a massive part in it. There's prerequisites. You got to work your butt off. You got to, you know, have certain skills that you learned growing up. You got to apply those skills, and your business has to get kind of lucky to start the flame and get going. And I think we capitalized on a big opportunity, but I think we were lucky, like a lot of entrepreneurs are. And I do feel like we have now reached a level of success that I'm very comfortable and at peace with.
That is awesome. Because sometimes some people are like, it's never going to stop, right? And I kind of feel that way only because I've got drive, and I think that I will work until the day I die, right? Because I enjoy what I do. I've gotten to the point where and again, this may be because I'm 50 years old, but I love the fact I've redefined success for myself. I love being able to share experiences and help other people, right? And that's a huge part. And that's just been within like the past 5 years. Prior to that, a lot of ego. I can do everything myself. And it's being able to step back. And I attribute that to the people I hang out with.
Totally.
Right? The people you hang out with have to be your biggest cheerleaders.
100%.
And with that said, there's a lot of people that you have to understand that you have to keep it more of a distance or unfortunately cut out of your life, right?
For sure. I think people should be ruthless about who they cut out in life.
You have to, because it can be a poison, right? It doesn't mean that you can't love someone from afar.
Sure.
But you know, there's if I can't, and I've said this several times, if I can't benefit you as an individual and pour into you and not even expect, but appreciate when you do it back to me, I don't want it.
I agree.
Right? If I can't help you become a better person and you help me become a better person, what are we doing? We weren't put on this planet to live life alone. And we should only be around those that can help us grow, no matter what that looks like, right? And so I've changed a bit of what I see success as is being able to pour into people, you know, and help things.
Well, I feel like I'm stealing this from other podcasts I've listened to, but there's a line that like grabs me, and it's like the best relationships are giving wars, right? Like you're literally trying to outcompete how much I can give to my friend, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna buy you dinner. Hey, I'm gonna like take you on this awesome vacation. You're gonna come to my house. I'm gonna cook you steak, and then it starts flowing when you have a giver that meets a giver. That's when you have tons of abundance. And you just got to cut out the people that are just leeches, right? Well, there's leeches out there.
100%. And it takes so much more energy to be negative than it does to be positive.
For sure.
And I was that negative dude. You know, and even, you know, at times my wife will just look at me and I know what it means. You know, like I'm starting to head down a negative path, and she'll just look at me and I know exactly what it is, you know, and I've got to veer back. Construction's can be an ugly industry.
Absolutely.
It's, you know, it's a primarily male-dominated, heavy testosterone industry.
100%.
You know, where when I was young, you know, you yell, you scream, sometimes things get physical, whatever, but it's just that industry. And it's being able to shut that off, right? But again, age and maturity also helps you understand that it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Well,
you know,
I think it's like, what fuel are you burning? And at the beginning, I'm a lot like you. I'm a hothead. I get worked up. It's easy for me to get motivated when I just pick a random enemy, even if it's not real.
Yeah.
Right. And I get myself into this like high like aggression mindset. And at the beginning, I feel like that was necessary. But now I'm like, if I want to keep running on this treadmill for as long as I want to go, I need to start burning a different fuel. Like I need to find peace. I need to make this sustainable. I need to create more balance. And I think the last couple of years I've done a lot better a job. Like I've got an amazing girlfriend. I have the gym. I'm working out all the time. Like I'm eating right. I'm sleeping right. And I think that's going to take me as far as I really want to go. And you asked earlier, like, hey, what's next? Like, do you feel like you've made it? I think you can feel like you've made it and be proud of where you are, and then say, I'm still obsessed with learning. I'm still obsessed with the next chapter, because it pushes you to grow. There becomes a point where it's not tons about the money, and it's more about like, what's next? Like, what's going to get me pumped up that day? You know?
Exactly. What value can I bring? What value can I see? Things like that. And that's what I was going to ask you as well. What are your outlets as a business owner? Everybody has different outlets, and it can be hiking, it could be art, it could be this, that, and the other. What do you lean towards as an outlet for yourself to kind of reset even?
Well, I think the non-negotiables that actually do serve me well is I go to the gym probably 5 days a week, and that's pretty honest. And I work out hard. I work out with friends, and specifically here at this gym, I get to talk to a lot of other people that are fantastic, right? So between sets and the sauna, that's my social outlet, and just hearing people and just like realizing that not everything in the computer is real life that day. You go talk to your friend who's just like shooting the shit and just making fun of you. It brings you back down to earth. It helps you not get so worked up about whatever was bothering you that day. So that's the biggest one that actually serves me.
Absolutely. That is phenomenal. And it's, you know, what's wild is, and I hope that it's not a craze, but the health and wellness community in Austin, but what is seen, I see it across the U.S. even, is huge. And I think that individuals are being more open-minded enough to understand that they're, you know, a healthy body is something that will help them throughout their day and throughout their life. And so I'm glad to hear that you're saying that. You know, we office in the gym, so there's not a whole hell of a lot of an excuse to walk up through here and walk through the gym. And you don't have a whole lot of excuses. So that is tremendous. So I've got one. I'm gonna pull this one out, and I even gave you a little forewarning on this one. So you've been on tons of interviews. You've been on podcasts, TV, everything else. What is one question, or a few even, that you've never been asked that you would always like to have been asked? Something, it can be something that, you know, someone that just doesn't even know about you. What would that one thing be?
Well, I think it would be more like a topic that I think more people should talk about on entrepreneurial podcasts, which is like, what role did like luck and opportunity play in your story? And I think we get on these podcasts and we we're successful, we're crushing it, everything's good, everything's easy all the time. But I think I got to admit and recognize how lucky I am, right? I grew up in a 2-parent household. My dad, when I was a kid, made me pick up the phone and call people when we were raising money for charity, right? At 11 years old, 12 years old, teacher gives you an assignment, hey, go raise some money for Jump Rope for Heart, right? The cardiac thing. And if you raise the money, you'll get this cute prize. Some parents just send an email to their whole company and say, can you donate to my kid's thing? My dad made me cold call people and ask for money. I didn't realize that at the time, how valuable that would be. When I started, you know, trying to make money and he made me pay for all my own things, he said, you're not old enough to get a job. You got to go start a car washing business. And when I had my first customer from the church, he wouldn't let me give that car back until he walked and looked at every single square inch of the car and said, you missed a spot. That burned details into my brain and how important it is to perfect the craft and not release something that's unfinished to a customer. And so I look at all those experiences and I'm like, how effing lucky, right? How did that get burned into my brain during the critical period so that when I was 18, selling was easy, right? Connecting with people was easy. Deal making was easy. I'd already been doing this for years and I just didn't know it at the time because it was all in the guise of parenting, charity, fundraising, but that's the core blocks of building a business. I got to graduate this business, or I got to graduate college with no debt. Literally starting at zero is a blessing, man. There's so many people that start deep in the negatives. Like, I think the average net worth of a 22-year-old in the US is like negative $32,000. That's fucked.
That's insane.
Like, just starting at zero is a blessing. And so I just think about all these things and I'm like, man, like I was born in America. Like, yes, you have to work your ass off. Yes, you have to do all the things that get talked about on podcasts, but there's a massive element of luck. I was born tall. Yeah. People take tall CEOs more seriously. They just do.
It's true.
I didn't pick that.
Yeah.
Right? So I just think that's an interesting topic that we should like unwind for people and be like, this is the honest truth.
Yeah.
You know, like you do got to work hard. But there's a ton of luck in this.
Yeah.
There really is.
It's a recipe, you know, and there's a right place in the right time. Yeah. You know, it's sometimes who you know.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's also, you know, you keep going back to your dad.
Yeah.
So with that said,
totally,
that's also something that transversely you can look out in the future by, you know, centering yourself around individuals. But it sounds like he poured a ton into you. And those are things oftentimes that go unlooked, right?
Totally.
You know, even growing up, I, you know, thought my dad was an ass and he's just doing this because he's being a jerk or whatever. And it took me until my mid-20s to look back and go, he wasn't doing this to be an ass, you know, and it took that long to resonate in me. Yeah. And those are things that I pass down to my boys as well.
100%.
Not because I want to be a dick, but because I want them to be successful.
Absolutely.
And with success comes boundaries, you know. And one of the reasons is I think you have to play within certain walls. Now, granted, you know, entrepreneurs always kind of play outside of those walls. However, they still have a structure and a balance in parameters around them. Yeah. And it really resonated with me. My oldest son, when he was young, he was a bit of a rebel, a little bit like me. And I really tightened the purse strings on him. Yeah. And one day he actually looked at me and he told me in his teens, I realize you're not being a dick, but I actually do perform better with boundaries. And it changed my mindset completely. Yeah. While I understood what I was doing, I did not know that he saw it. Does that make sense?
Because you thought, hey, I'm just tightening it up on him. I'm making his life a little harder. And then he had the self-awareness to say, that actually helped me.
Yes, which took me into my mid-20s to even realize, right? And so he got it at a younger age. And he was the one out of the three boys that I was like, uh-oh, this crazy train right here. Yeah. And he is extremely self-centered. Yeah. And that is a lot of my wife and how he was just brought up. Yeah. You know, so that is powerful. Yeah. And that's to your point. You know, a lot of kids do not grow up in a two-parent household. No. You know, and that does have a massive effect on kids. And it's things that you will not realize until later in life.
100%.
That you may never know, right? Yeah. And it affects in small ways. But having that individual, even if you do come from a split household, there's nothing wrong with attaching yourself to someone that you feel can pour into you.
100%.
You know, and you've got to have those role models and stuff like that. Yeah. What groups, or are there any groups or organizations that you deal with right now that allow you to do some sort of mentorship at all currently?
Like to give to another person?
Exactly.
I really feel that it's this gym, man, right? I think I just hit that age where I'm kind of in that 4 years ahead generation. Now there's a couple 22, 23-year-old guys that are hustling. They're doing e-commerce stuff. They're doing TikTok shop stuff. And I just started talking to them, man. And I said, hey, like, let's hang out. Let's get to know each other. And I think just having somebody only a couple years ahead is the best thing for a lot of people at that young age, because it's so lonely. None of your peers are doing it.
100%. You know what's wild is it seems like there's a couple generations that were lost.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know, we had Nintendo when I was a kid and stuff like that. And then the bringing on of technology, I think, definitely pulled some of that away.
Yeah.
But we had a couple generations that just didn't want to do anything, you know? Yeah. And now it seems to be coming around where there's hustlers out there. And it gives me hope for our future, for sure. And that's what I love to see, right? I think, you know, us Gen Xers, us old folks, we were a group of hustlers, and then it kind of started to go downhill. Yeah. But everything in history's always been secular, right? It's like bell bottoms will always come back at some point, right? You know? Yeah. And I think that we're at that point, you know, and I'm extremely hopeful of our future because of, you know, the younger generations like you and the even younger ones.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of conditions too, right? Like maybe there was a gap and I'm not going to pretend I was alive for it. But right now in my generation, conditions are shitty, you know? Like kids are graduating college, saddled with debt. They're not getting employed, right? Even the smartest of the smart, right? Like all the guys that were going to be consultants can't get a consulting job. Banking, a lot of them aren't hiring right now. A lot of these industries that were like, hey, if you're smart, you work your butt off, you're going to have a fat salary, you're going to be super successful. It's just not true. And so it's creating this holy shit moment where we all need to start running. We all need to start trying to find our own path. And I think that's why we're going to have an entrepreneurial renaissance.
I think so. And especially in the blue collar arena.
100%.
So I taught college courses at ACC, construction courses for almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And for someone, I hated school, did not like school. I did enough to get by. But what's funny is supposedly some of those guys are some of the best entrepreneurs when you look at some of that. So I'm like, okay, you know, a little bit of ADD, hated school. I can put my attention to here. And I only did like a year and a half college, but loved teaching.
Amazing.
And so I try to push people into any type of trade, like a true trade, something that if shit hits the fan, you can always go back to getting a job. 100%. Things that people will always need. You always need HVAC guys, plumbers, electricians, things like that. You always need food. You always need housing. Go to the things that will always be needed, right? And even if you change your mind down the road and do something different, fine. You can always go back to something else because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You can lose everything you have tomorrow, but the things and the skills that you have can never be taken away. And that's where, to your point, that renaissance I see can happen too, because now even to start out as a plumber, you're making $70,000, $75,000 just to dig a ditch. 100%. And it's not because it's skilled in the beginning, it's because no one wants to do it. And it only takes about 7 years to get your master's license. And at that time, you can open your own shop.
Yeah.
And that's where it really starts making sense, you know?
Well, and we can go full circle. You said at the beginning, right? A lot of people talk about doing their passion, right? I didn't wake up and say, I have a passion to be a moving company, right? Like it was a need, we filled a need. I think I'm in the camp of don't do what you love, do what you have to do so that later in life you get to do what you want to do. And I think a lot of people should really adopt that mindset because that's where the money is, right? Is whatever the shittiest job is, if you want to go and fill it, you're going to make a lot. And I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about business. I happen to run a moving company, but I love my life, right? It just took me a while to get there. At the beginning stage, I was the mover. I was the sales guy. And now you get to be a business owner. And it just takes a while to get there. Do what you have to do. Then you get to do what you want to do.
Well, I want to close this up with one last question and something that you had just brought up. You filled a need. That was kind of your why. What is it that you want to ultimately do then? You know, you said you're a business owner, you filled a need, and you've gotten good at it. You're a people person. And that was not your true want. Do you know what that want is yet? You may not, you know, and that can constantly be evolving. I'll give you an example.
Let's do it.
I've always wanted to own a ranch, to take kids, fatherless kids, out on a ranch to be able to enjoy hunting, just being in the outdoors, and also do the same thing with disabled vets. So that's a goal of mine. And again, I'll work until I die, right? So we now own a ranch in Brownwood, Texas, and we grow deer. Myself and a buddy of mine, we own it together.
Amazing.
I'm in the process of building a couple houses out there. So I've got the trajectory. I've got my goal. I'm doing it.
Nice.
You know, and we're probably a year and a half out from doing something that I hope will be extremely impactful for those that don't get that opportunity. You know, at the end of the day, I'd be fine sitting on a porch, drinking iced tea or a whiskey with a cigar, watching deer, you know, and bringing people out that would never have the opportunity to enjoy something like that. That would bring me joy. That in itself will give me some sort of completion, although I'll still keep going, right? But I'll be able to sit out there, watch the sun go down and go, this was my goal. And I've had that goal since I was in high school. So I just always thought that was the pinnacle.
I have I think I have two goals that I've started to define in my life, and I'm sure they can change given how young I am. But in the business sense, I think the thing that gets me fired up every single day is pushing myself to learn a new thing. And so I want to keep leveling up. I want to take this company as big as I humanly can so I can keep learning skills. I want to learn how to buy other companies. I want to learn the hardest thing about integrating. I want to learn what a big level partnership is with a national brand, and I want to get better at marketing. And I think when you do all those things in your first business, it'll set you up for when you eventually move on to the next one. You can work with badass people, right? I want to work with smarter people. I want to change bigger problems. So I think in business, for me, it's just all about the learning, the impact, and like, how can I make the most badass team ever? And I think part of that is you need a big track record. And so if I want to go and recruit the best of the best for whatever the future thing is, which I don't know what it is yet, you got to have a hell of a track record and be really sharp. So that's my business thing. Personal, it's actually way simpler. I think the only thing I care about is being a dad and being a good role model in whatever community I choose to live. And right now, I think that's going to be Austin. I think you always have like a couple friends, dads that change your life, right? They say something and help you change your point of view. And I think just being like a good role model, somebody who doesn't cheat, lie, steal, do unethical things, and just showing that you can be wealthy and not an asshole, that's all I want in life, you know? Just be a positive impact on some younger guys.
That's tremendous. That's tremendous. Well, I appreciate you coming in. It was a blast.
Appreciate it.
And I wish you all the success in the world, and I know that you'll accomplish it, my friend.
I thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me, brother. That was fun.